Please welcome Tony Chan, Editor-at-Large of CommsDay.
Good morning, guys. Wow, thank you very much. I'm Tony Chan from CommsDay. I've been covering the telecoms industry for the last 15 to 20 years. I can't remember that far back. But the industry obviously has underwent tremendous change in the last 5 or 6 years. You have things like iPhones, you have high-speed broadband, you have LTE. So in the consumer space, the demand and services has grown tremendously. In that period, what we're going to talk about in this panel is how that actually impacts the wholesale market, which many of you are participants in. So with me to discuss this topic today is John Garrett, who is the President of Carrier Sales for Pacnet, and Ricky Chau, who's the Vice President of Asia Pacific Sales for Level 3. Please welcome our panelists. So I'm just going to kick off with questions. Basically, as I discussed to the audience, the retail space has exploded over the last 5 or 6 years. How is that impacting your business as wholesale carriers?
Well, obviously, the traditional wholesale set of services for a carrier market, it is exploding as the retail customers are consuming more and more traditional capacity. Those providers need more and more capacity in order to deliver the experience their end customers require. So for us at Pacnet, traditional capacity, be it wavelengths or IP transit services, the amount of capacity that we're selling is growing year over year. Our challenge is just to deal with the decreasing price points.
Right. Ricky?
Yeah, we see a similar challenge. The broadband exploding, you see, more video running over your networks. So you need to spend, capex to enable the growth. But on the other hand, we're also seeing, that drive new requirements that will possibly create new demand from the wholesale carrier to address in the consumer market, especially retail telco. Want to look at how you can get a better experience in the video networks, right? So that's the other thing we are seeing from that opportunity.
Okay, I'm just going to follow up on that question. With the increase in demand, are you seeing a corresponding increase in revenue?
Like I said, the one pillar of our wholesale carrier strategy is obviously just raw capacity. And we sold our first 40 gig wavelength services towards the end of last year. Traditionally, people are still using 10G and lower SDH-based capacity, but now they're going up to 10G and 40G. IP transit, 1 gig ports are gone. It's 10 gig ports and 40 gig ports. So the capacity is growing very, very fast. The challenge is to deal with the price points. More specifically in our area in Asia Pacific, there's more and more capacity choices. More and more subsea routes are coming online, more capacity available. That puts pressure on price points. So the challenge is growing capacity being sold at a higher rate than the prices are depreciating.
Right. Ricky, you mentioned investment.
Yeah, same thing we're seeing. Volume is growing. Your unit cost is coming. Your unit price is coming down.
Okay.
Right. So we actually create the impact in your margin, and which is happening in the traditional wholesale in data services.
Okay. Okay. So one of the key drivers of all this bandwidth on global networks is obviously the internet and OTT players, over-the-top players. How are they impacting your business?
Well, some of those players are getting into the wholesale space themselves. They will become members of new cable builds. So that presents a challenge to us in the fact that we continue to try to service their large wholesale needs, but at the same time they're going out and building their own systems, using some of that capacity to get diversity through transactions where they're buying and selling capacity with their partners. So while they remain very, very large customers of ours, they in turn are increasingly becoming a competitor at the same time.
Well, what we're actually seeing happening in the bigger ecosystem, right? So in the ecosystem that you have the platform, the content and the network, the telco, and also device. What John mentioned about it is we're actually looking at some of the players are shifting to the other surface, like Google is doing Google Voice, and you're actually seeing device manufacturers is moving to do your cloud services, iCloud from Apple. You are also seeing content media owner actually doing their own CDN networks. So that is, from my perspective, is both a challenge and also create a new opportunity for the wholesale carrier to address.
Okay. So what are some of these opportunities, for example?
Well, for me, I mentioned the over-the-top companies are looking for more than just capacity as well. So that's an opportunity for us. We're trying to leverage all the real estate that we have throughout Asia Pacific in terms of our landing stations to build those out and provide data center services, providing more of a managed service component to that as well on top of that, so that we're able to service needs specifically for a lot of companies from North America and the US that want to get out to Asia. They want a turnkey solution. They need the space and power. They need the managed service capabilities, and then obviously they need the raw capacity. So we're trying to leverage that and provide just a turnkey solution, inclusive of CDN. We're taking a strategic look that CDN-related services are going to tie right in with capacity. People need to have their content delivered, either through having fatter pipes throughout the region or in conjunction with having some CDN capability as well.
Ricky?
I actually see that from two segments. The consumer segment, you continue to see bandwidth demand driven by broadband uptake and also 3G and 4G LTE, so on and so forth. But in that segment, you also actually create a new requirement from the retail telco, right? So example, I talk about it, how we actually enable them to have a better video experience, right? So you might looking at something like how can we enable them to do content localization? How can we actually enable them to do peering with specific content they want to connect to? The other thing in the consumer space we're seeing is what we call the Internet of Things. Actually, to look at research, prediction is by 2016, you actually got 3 times more of connected device as the world population. So you have more devices get connected. So security become a real issue, a real concern for the retail telco and also for the consumer. So I think that also create new spectrum of solution looking at how can the wholesale telco can address this security solution for the retail the telco segment. The other perspective here is don't forget about the enterprise. When you think about especially what's happening in Asia Pacific here is the Asian enterprise is actually going regional and going global. And typically they have a very strong relationship with the in-country telco. As they're going global, the in-country retail telco may not fully address their need. So there's a partnership requirement for the wholesale carrier to enable the retail telco to give them footprint portfolio to offer the enterprise solution for their customers.
Okay, so there's actually, what you're saying is there's actually more demand on the capabilities of wholesale to actually address some of these emerging needs. So in that respect, do you see any particular dynamics within the wholesale space that you see for the next 12 months? Things like software-defined networking. I mean, is that something that you need to look at to anticipate future demand?
Well, we see a couple of things, right? As I mentioned, we see security become very, very critical. And you're looking at the enterprise demand, right? So what's happening today? The enterprise going global. The Asian enterprise is getting much more sophisticated in the ICT. The ICT getting more levered, means, by cloud. You see big data. Big data drive storage, they drive virtualization. And you think about it from a telco perspective, when the ICT service getting more leveraged, the retail telco is actually in a very, very good position to address them. So I think what the wholesale telco can play is to actually collaborate with the retail telco to actually complement the offering. So to give them a much broader offering to address the emerging or growing enterprise requirements.
We, as I mentioned, we just had delivered some 40 gig services towards the end of last year. We're upgrading some of our Trans-Pacific, our Asia-Pacific networks with EAC and C2C to 100 gig technology. All of that is OTN compliant. So a lot of our traditional carrier customers that we've been selling capacity to are very interested about having us with OTN compliant capabilities for better management and visibility. These customers of ours, they want to manage things on their own if they can. So we are looking out at network as a service and what these software-defined network capabilities are going to do to allow us to provide the fat pipes that previously we would have to manage for them. They'd call in or they'd check a portal for status. But the next world, probably not this year, you said the next 12 months, probably not this year, but on our roadmap for sometime in 2014 is to have these capabilities commercially available so that carrier customers coming to us with requirements for Asia Pacific capacity can go in and purchase a domain from Pacnet where they are then able to self-provision their own customers and manage the services over that network seamlessly without involvement from Pacnet.
What about in terms of the traditional wholesale market? I mean, of pure bandwidth, like big fat pipes. Do you still see that growing in a sense?
No question. That's still going to grow. But again, we want to offer a full suite of services because traditionally in the past it was just, okay, we need more capacity, we need fatter pipes, but then people are thinking, well, where are we trying to get to? What capacity are we trying to deliver and what eyeballs are we trying to deliver them to? So there's a strategic placement of data, and that comes to the need for data centers and space, and then all the managed services that come on top of that. And then, as I said before, there's the delivery of that with the CDN capability that we now have on our network for a full suite of offering.
Yeah, I think the bandwidth market is still going with the demand from the consumer broadband market. I think wholesale has to innovate, right? I mean, the traditional wholesale is actually under a lot of pressure. And from my perspective, infrastructure is important, right? But I think there's getting more demand from the retailer, which is looking at more solution, more value-added service. And that's a emerging opportunity for the wholesale carrier to address and actually to create a new reference stream to complement some of the decline in the traditional wholesale revenue.
Okay.
The other thing that's always been a traditional part of our wholesale offering is what we call white label, and enabling North American carriers or European carriers to expand into Asia, to put their what we call dots on maps, so that they can show that they've got IPVPN or EIPL capabilities in Asia Pacific without having to make the capital investment of popping each location, be it in Malaysia or in Vietnam or China or wherever. So that's something that we continue to actively promote. The traditional NNI has always been on layer 3 with IPVPN, but increasingly more and more interest on the Ethernet side. And again, just having that interconnection capability so that carriers can extend out to Asia. Maybe they put 1 or 2 POPs in the region, but they don't have to put investment in all locations. But their end customers need all locations. And so we're happy to fill that gap and deliver a service that is seamless to them and seamless to their customers. They don't need to know that it's Pacnet that's supplying the underlying infrastructure because they're dealing with their local carrier customer.
Right. Okay. Just to add some color to it, I'm just going to ask these gentlemen what phone they use and what, from that phone itself, which part of the wholesale market do you think it's actually using when you're calling somebody? Like, I'm sure somebody has an iPhone, right? So
I have
when it goes to the internet, do you think somewhere there there's IP transit involved?
Most certainly, most certainly. So here I plugged in, I put my little 12-digit code in here, and I get my free Wi-Fi access. But surely that is that's the beauty and the complexity of the internet. So what does the network look like, and how am I getting from point A to point B? But certainly IP transit's an active component to that.
I mean, what about level 3? I mean, level 3 I think carries something like 40% of the internet or IP traffic. Do you see that like as part of powering this whole retail surge of demand?
No, I think we don't have the ambition to go to the consumer retail space, right? We're still in a business to enable, the telco, and they empower the consumer voice and data business. But as I mentioned, we probably see a new segment, right? I mean, a few years ago, we never thought about Google with the voice. I mean, now we see Google's doing voice. Facebook might actually start doing, VoIP for their subscriber as well.
It's like for IP transit, I mean, every year telegeography provides some pretty not so great numbers, let's say, in terms of price degradation across globally. Actually, I mean, previously I was told just on the plane over here by somebody that even previously really premium markets like the Middle East have actually fallen like by heavy percentage points. Where do you see that market's going? I mean, there's definitely demand with all these smartphones, but is there a solution to what you guys are facing to address that demand?
I'm sure the demand is there, but you're right. We're not active in the Middle East, but in our sweet spot throughout Asia, markets like Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore have seen price declines begin some years back. But then you get into other markets like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and while the price per meg is still high in comparison to, say, Tokyo or Hong Kong, it has come down tremendously in the last 1, 2, 3 years. So that is a challenge for us because, again, traffic is growing exponentially, but not at the rate that the prices are coming down. So I think you're going to see a change in IP transit, both in how it's billed and also what really is IP transit. Full upstream, you're going to get to some routing differences. You're already seeing some different types of IP transit service levels, which is new because people say, capacity is capacity, IP capacity is the same. It's not. How is traffic routed? The big question in Asia Pacific increasingly is how do you get capacity in and out of China, which has very expensive price points, or do you route it all over back to the U.S. And then the end user experience suffers. So I think you're going to be beginning to see some type of QoS and service levels that differentiate different types of IP transit.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. We see volumes going. And offset by the price erosion. But on the other hand, we also look at how we actually solve the telco's problem, right? Because as we talk about it, video become very, very critical. And it's buying IP transit solution. How can we actually help the telco to improve the customer experience for the subscriber? So how can actually we, working with them, for example, localized content in the particular location so they can get a better experience watching some of the rich media and video. So instead of going to the price battle, if you will, looking at other solution, actually looking at the diversified revenue and getting new solution in front of your customers.
Right. Okay. So there's actually room to. I mean, it's interesting that Ricky brought up the topic of experience, right? and John as well. But, so I mean, for wholesale carriers like yourselves to kind of almost address this demand for customer experience from these new services, what can you do besides just like tweaking? Is there technologies that you can tweak your network with, or is it more like routing?
Again, to my example about how traffic's routed in and out of China, do you route directly into China and work with your mainland Chinese partners? Do you route traffic via another regional country that's going to have a much lower cost than if you're going direct, or do you swing it all the way back to the U.S.? So there, vastly different user experiences in those three scenarios, and vastly different cost models behind them. Our challenge is to get our customers to see the change in value and how that impacts their end user customer experience, instead of just looking at that bottom right-hand number on the price per meg, and that's what drives it. But sooner or later, people are going to recognize that you do get what you pay for, and as providers like Pacnet and Level 3 begin to have different types of IP transit offerings with different service levels, I think people are going to be able to see, okay, if I pay a little bit more, I'm going to have a better experience for my end customers. What does that do to reduce my churn? What does that do to increase the likelihood that customer is going to expand and buy other services from me?
Do you see the same kind of trend?
Yeah, but on the other hand, we also see it's a cultural change as well, right? I mean, it's a very different proposition. You're selling very standardized bandwidth products versus you're selling solutions, right? And typically, when you go to sell this value solution, it's not like wholesale product. It's very, very standardized. You're actually going to do a very, very customized solution for a specific carrier or to address a solution. But on the other hand, you need to collaborate, right? Because to collaborate, you need to understand not only your retail customer's requirement, you need to understand the end customer requirement and what drives that. And in a real situation, you're actually seeing more what I call co-creations. So you can seeing that the product offering or value is not actually created from the wholesale carrier alone. It's actually created together with your customer. So it's actually a total shift in paradigm when you're moving, not moving away, but you actually diversify from selling traditional wholesale and going to more the solution selling.
Okay. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Are there any questions from the audience for these gentlemen? If not, then I'm just going to ask these two gentlemen one last question. It's like, what's the outlook for the wholesale market, given the retail outlook is quite bright?
Again, demand is growing, so that's always the positive. We haven't talked about the difficult question that gets discussed in these venues about how revenue flows from the end users that are using the internet and purchasing things on the internet and buying content, how that flows all the way down through the chain. That is a difficult question and something that we're still grappling with because we're at the very end of that chain. But the other services that I mentioned, offering a more comprehensive suite of services beyond just raw capacity, I think is a very good opportunity for us. Ricky?
Yeah, I think you continue to see, the wholesale offering, the bandwidth of the wholesale voice is still be around. But you're seeing the wholesale carrier actually pushing more the enterprise offering to the retail customer. And then you see more convergence between wholesale and retail.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a great discussion. Thank you.
That's great.